Hello, good afternoon. I hope that everybody can hear me. Welcome to this virtual get-together. My name is Jürgen Siebel. I'm the Executive Director of CEDEFOP, and we're happy that you joined us here today to discuss a very timely topic, digitalization in small and medium-sized enterprises. And we think that every of these virtual get-togethers is a little special because we put one policy-relevant topic in the spotlight and discuss findings in front of an audience, with policymakers, social partners, vet and skills ecosystem stakeholders from Europe and beyond. So just like yesterday or last week, actually, we presented the first findings of the new CEDEFOP European Training and Learning Survey and discussed them with experts, social partners and the European Commission. And this virtual get-together is extra special because we co-organize it with our sister agency from Dublin, the Eurofound. And we do that because we have something to say. And also because we have something to celebrate, because both CEDEFOP and Eurofound celebrate their 50th anniversary in 2025. I mean, combined, that's 100 years of services. Just think of it. And I'm very happy that I'm joined by my good colleague and friend, Ivailo Kalfin, the Executive Director of Eurofound. Hello, Ivailo. I will give you the floor in just a few minutes. And since 1975, our agencies have been providing evidence that supports Europe. I will not take you back all the way into the 70s, but obviously times have changed tremendously since then. In 1975, we used typewriters. Our economies were largely powered by coal. We had no cell phones, and education was analog. In the context of crisis, of scarcity, stagflation, energy shortages, and the end of the post-war boom, European leaders in 1975 recognized that leadership is foresight. The first social action program put interdisciplinary analysis into the spotlight and helped set the stage for the EU's first specialized and decentralized agencies, CEDEFOP and Eurofound. Fast forward to today, we live in challenging times again, where poly-crisis, disruption and insecurity about the future meet long-term structural trends such as population aging and a twin transition. Policymakers depend on the research and analysis of CEDEFOP and Eurofound to inform flagship initiatives such as the Union of Skills or the new European Vocational Education and Training Strategy and the Quality Jobs Roadmap. Not just information, but solid, sound, and trusted evidence is what makes economies thrive and societies inclusive. It is with a sense of pride that I can say that our two agencies are increasingly interconnected and determined to provide analyses that help Europe realize its ambitions. Cooperation in the past decade has grown, and what we do together always adds value. CEDEFOP and Eurofound not only work together on surveys, on reports and analysis, but also on supporting social partner and governments in the member states. We also join forces with other agencies within the DG Employment family and beyond. We are both situated in the corners of Europe, in Thessaloniki and in Dublin, but communication tools, science fiction in the 1970s, but available today, make the distance almost irrelevant. In fact, the 2-hour time difference is actually more of a problem, you know, this good morning Dublin, Kalispera, Thessaloniki thing. So CEDEFOP and Eurofound have worked as a team on the digital and green transition, on AI, and on learning-rich workplaces, just to name a few of the topics we have recently worked on. But coming back to today's event, it is important because it's about SMEs and digitalization, because small and medium-sized enterprises are at the heart of the European economy. Digitalization, on the other hand, is the most impactful and disruptive trend of our time. And while big players in labor markets and in markets for goods and services will often know how to go about becoming more digital, that is not always the case for small and medium-sized enterprises. At the same time, the 25 million SMEs in the European Union, they drive growth, they drive innovation and employment, and they play a key role in digitalization and in mainstreaming digital technologies across the continent. So in this event today, jointly with Eurofound, we will present the key challenges and barriers that SMEs face in becoming more digital. We will also look at the effectiveness of digitalization and digital skills support measures. Before we take a deep dive into the new findings, it's now my great pleasure to pass the baton to Eurofound. So Ivailo, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jürgen, and greetings from the other end of Europe, from the diagonal, from Thessaloniki, from Dublin. I'm very happy and that we have so many people participating in our webinar, and I can only confirm and echo the words of Jürgen that when you see both agencies organizing an event, that is something. Because both Eurofound and Cedefop, we are specialized in our areas of competence, and I think over the last 50 years we built quite a good competence in these areas. But when we work together on some issues, and this is the case with the digitalization of the small and medium-sized enterprises, we try to consider a topic from different points of view, so that the complementarity there brings indeed a new value of the analysis of the particular problem. So I hope this is also much more informative and useful for our stakeholders. And our stakeholders, by the way, we are two of the three in Europe tripartite agencies. So we are happy to have on our boards the social partners and the European governments, which sometimes turns our boards into a platform for very intense dialogue. But then the research and the everything that we produce is very stable and very well grounded and non-biased. So I think that's a value that our both agencies do have. When we speak, and this particular report is also very relevant and very interesting also about the focus it has. Because as Jürgen just mentioned, the small and medium-sized enterprises are indeed the backbone of the European economy. And now we are living in a time of a very rapid transformation. The environment around Europe and around the European economy doesn't make it easy for the big companies, not to speak about the smaller ones, to cope with that. And I don't mean only the digital transformation and the disruptive use of artificial intelligence tools, etc., but also look at the environment around Europe. I mean, the war which is raging around us, the big questions with the international trade and the tariffs that come from the new American administration, the objective processes that are going with the climate change and with the digital transformation. So the context and the environment is not stable at all. So I wouldn't say that we are at an equilibrium point where companies can fare easily. And the problems are even higher for small and medium-sized enterprises, and the report very well focuses on that. Small and medium-sized enterprises, they have their restrictions, and this is by definition their restrictions in terms of resources, in terms of both financial and human, in terms of possibility to invest into some particular solutions, in the possibility to assure the adequate training of the staff, etc., etc. So you have a number of issues that are very specific for the European small and medium-sized enterprises. And this is exactly the interesting part of it. There are two ways forward. One is leave it to the market. I mean, whatever the market decides. That means that many of them would have problems, and many of them would disappear under the pressure of the competition, and including the competition of the very large international companies. The other way is to find the support, to create an ecosystem for the small and medium-sized enterprises, which is enabling them, helping them to be more competitive. And when we speak about competitiveness of Europe, and this is a very visible example of the link between competitiveness and the areas that together with Cedefop, Eurofound and Cedefop, we researched the living, working conditions, skills of the people, there is a direct link between that. If we want more competitive Europe, then we need to have competitive SMEs, then we need to create the ecosystem and the conducive environment so that they can fare properly with the new technologies. Technologies never destroyed, in general, more jobs than they have created. So I'm not concerned with what some people say artificial intelligence is going to take all economic activities and humans have to think about the meaning of life. I'm much more concerned with the speed, because the high speed and the request for higher resources in order to cope with that puts smaller companies and medium-sized companies at a disadvantaged position. And this is what we try to help with our analysis. Of course, I'm not going to go into details of it because this is the subject of our today's seminar. But again, I think it is very topical. I'm sure that this report is going to be very widely used by policymakers, hopefully, but also by managers in small and medium-sized enterprises, by workers in these companies. And of course, we will continue working on that. And very happy when we do this with our sister agency. This is how we call each other, sister agencies. The setup, indeed, I think we create better products when on some topics we join forces, like it is this case. So without further ado, I would pass the floor to Jasper and Franz, that are probably going to introduce us to the topic.
Yeah, thank you very much to both directors for the introduction. In the next 20 minutes, Jasper and myself, I'm Franz Eifer, I'm a research manager at Eurofound, will give you some insights of the report. So for the report, we used many data sources from both CEDEFOP and Eurofound. We used also data from the European Commission about the DAISY, digital economy and society. And we will now show you some of the results that we are discussing in the report before we then will have a panel discussion. So in this report, in the first part, we focused very much on the DAISY indicators that are relevant to small and medium enterprises, looking at where Europe stands today and how far it is still to the 2030 goal of the DAISY indicators. The DAISY indicators are a good EU monitoring tool, and they track how member states are progressing across essential digital dimensions, from connectivity and digital skills to the digitalization of businesses and public services. And if we go in the next slide, we see here first a country ranking of EU member states according to the basic level of digital intensity in 2024. As of 2024, only 2 member states, namely Denmark and Finland, had already reached the EU's ambitious digital decade target of 90% of SMEs achieving at least a basic level of digital intensity by 2030. These 2 countries benefit from comprehensive digital strategies, strong public investment, and a very mature digital infrastructure. And this shows that the strategy and the policies are very important, because as we see, many SMEs are more reactive in this regard instead of taking a proactive approach when it comes to the digitalization of their processes. Across the EU, the average stands at 73%, which also highlights that there is still a significant gap to close. And we also see, of course, a clear geographical divide, typically with the Northern and Western European countries generally showing high levels of basic digital intensity, while Southern and especially Eastern member states lag behind, including Bulgaria, Greece, Hungary, and Latvia, where we see adoption rates below 60%. While the basic digital intensity indicator is very useful as a benchmark, at the same time it also masks country-specific strengths and weaknesses that should be kept in mind when interpreting these results. Moving to the next slide, we see here two slides with specific information. On the left-hand side, we see the development of the use of computers and the internet by employees in SMEs, and the development from 2010 to 2024. Between 2010 and 2024, the proportion of SMEs whose employees use computers and the internet grow by 20 percentage points from 40 to 60% across the EU as a whole. And a strong increase, but again, hiding some of the variations which we see again between the Nordic countries. Here we also include Norway, Sweden, and Finland that report the highest usage levels, while Romania and Bulgaria remained at the bottom in both 2010 and 2024 rankings, with only 38% and 44% of SMEs having their employees using computers in the internet in 2024. When we look at the right-hand map, we see the level of EU business adoption, and the divide becomes even more apparent, again with Denmark, Finland, but also Belgium, leading with over 66% of SMEs using e-business tools. Also Spain and the Netherlands and Sweden perform strongly with rates close or above 60%. And on the other hand, in several Eastern member states, we see e-business is adopted by less than 30% of the SMEs in these respective countries. We also examine the use of internal e-business systems, such as, for instance, supply chain management tools. And here, enterprise size also matters. Over 50% of the large companies use these systems, but across the SMEs, it's only a fourth of them. And within the SMEs, the medium-sized firms are ahead of the small ones, which is, of course, also a typical topic as regards resources. If we now go to the next slide, we see also in terms of ICT security measures, also data from 2024, that the good news is across small, medium, and large organizations, some ICT security measures are implemented in almost all of them. So we see here above 90%. We also see that in the small enterprises and in the medium ones, also strong password authentication, for instance, or data backup to separate location are pretty common. But on the bottom of this ranking, we see that biometric authentication methods or ICT risk assessment, such as periodic assessments of probability and consequences of ICT security incidences, are much less common, especially in the small enterprises. On the other hand, the large organizations adopt these measures in large numbers as well. Most of these measures are adopted by at least 75% or more, and only the biometric authentication methods are not yet that much widespread. And with that, I hand over to Jasper, who now gives you some indication of the skills gaps.
Yes, thanks, Franz, and thanks first everyone joining us. Please also be aware that you have the opportunity to ask questions. If you have a question, please put it in the meeting chat, and we'll try to do our best to get to those questions after the presentations, but maybe also after the panel. So if you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat. So behind actually all these statistics and these differences that we see in digitalization in SMEs between countries, but also the difference we see with larger enterprises, actually there are a range of barriers to digitalization, online sales, and also the adoption of AI. And as part of this research project that we jointly did as agencies, we looked at those barriers. And we have quite a systematic assessment of what are the main barriers for SMEs. So first important barrier is financial constraints. We see that it's a recurring theme in our research, is that the difficulty SMEs actually face in securing the funding that they need for meaningful digital transformation. And it's not only about getting the funding, it's also about the administrative complexity. Even when funding is available, and in some cases abundant, SMEs often struggle to navigate support systems. They face heavy administrative burdens, fragmented programs, complex rules, unclear eligibility criteria, and sometimes also difficult or extensive reporting requirements. third factor is limited incentives in local markets. In some countries, in Poland, for example, traditional SMEs mainly serve local customers. So our Italian expert mentioned that some customers are reluctant to interact via digital means. So in such circumstances, of course, the motivation to move online is much weaker. Fourth, what we also often see is that digitalization in SMEs is driven by necessity rather than strategy. SMEs rarely digitalize proactively, apart from maybe some very specific sectors or SMEs which are, for instance, in high tech. So in most SMEs, it's usually external pressures, such as labor shortages, that push them to adopt digital tools, but often in isolated areas. Think, for instance, about invoicing or logistics. And then finally, as Frans already also said, digital skills gaps. Of course, this is a very important issue. Many SMEs simply don't have the skills needed for digital marketing, for e-commerce, for online payments, or for data analytics. This lack of skills also reinforces a broader resistance to change among SME leaders and entrepreneurs. So let's zoom in a little bit on the extent to which digital skill gaps are being overcome. What do we actually know about digital skills training in SMEs? Now, of course, the first answer is always looking at data. And what we do know from the data is that the smaller the enterprise, the less digital training takes place. So Eurostat data for 2024 shows that 21% of SMEs in the EU provided training to their personnel to develop their ICT skills. Small enterprises struggle much more to do this. Only 17% reported that they provided such training. And that's much less than the 41% of medium-sized businesses, and the about 70% of large enterprises that provides digital training to staff. There are also important geographical differences, and you can see in the map there that there is a geographical divide in the level of investment in ICT training for SMEs. So Northern and Western European countries generally perform much better than Central and Eastern European countries, but there are also exceptions. And if you look at Estonia or Poland, they have high proportions of SMEs offering ICT training to their staff, and these are more in line with some of the other northern countries. In France, the share is relatively low and seems to be more in line with what we observe also in Eastern European countries. Now, this is the perspective of enterprises. We can also look at the perspective of adult workers. And actually, instead of what we regularly do, surveys among workers to understand skills mismatches, and training needs. And according to one of our latest surveys, we found that 47% of workers that are employed by micro enterprises actually participated in formal or informal education or training. That is much less than the 64% of employees employed in companies with more than 200 employees. This number is not on the slide. What I did put on the slide is the share of trained adult workers that actually participate in digital skills training by enterprise size. So these are all workers that are trained workers, and we try to understand how much of those trained workers are actually taking part in digital skills training. What we see here is that in SMEs, it's 44% of trained workers that take a digital skills training, while in some of the bigger companies, it's about 51%, and the large companies is also 51%. So basically, there's not so much difference here. If there is training, it's quite likely to be digital. Here we look at the differences between SMEs that are highly digital and SMEs that are not. So we have some quite unique pre-pandemic data that was also the result of a cooperation between Eurofound and Zetafone, which is the European Company Survey. So this survey data shows that there is a positive correlation between digitalization and training during work time and digitalization and on-the-job training. It also shows that continuous training is more common in digitalized SMEs, and that jobs with limited learning opportunities are more common in SMEs with limited digitalization. So we also were able to look at the perceived importance of training. So among highly digitalized SMEs, training was a high priority for 46% of the managers that we surveyed, compared to only 31 in SMEs with limited levels of digitalization. So all this suggests that SMEs with limited digitalization may underestimate the role of training, or they may face resources constraints that prevent them from prioritizing digital training, even if it could help them advance digitally. Now, from a policy perspective, this finding points to the link between digital maturity and investment in training. So less digitally advanced SMEs may be falling behind, not just in technology, but also in workforce development. So via the interviews, of course, we also got good insights into the challenges of securing digital skills in SMEs. And experts also suggested ways forward to address such challenges. Now, unsurprisingly, perhaps, the shortages of ICT professionals and the high costs that it typically takes to employ such workers play a key role. And rural areas are more impacted by such shortages. And part of the shortages also relate to the salary differences for ICT professionals between SMEs and larger firms. In larger firms, typically, they would be able to earn more. And then there are challenges in reskilling staff for new profiles, which is more complex than simply upskilling. We also found that experts sometimes mentioned double cost when staff goes on external training, and the limited opportunities for training for managers and entrepreneurs, which limits business openness towards digitalization and their digital savviness. Opportunities relate to skills-based migration programs that we see in some countries to expand the supply of digital skills, but also digital maturity assessment and funding that helps boost digitalization efforts. Then, throughout the report, you will find examples of how funding instruments such as vouchers, tax credits, grants, and training funds can be used effectively. Now, when it comes to training, opportunities often mentioned were on-the-job training, perhaps not surprisingly, because it's the most practical and most effective form of training. But also training programs for managers were seen as something that was missing in some cases. And then from some countries, we got insights that mentoring and reverse mentoring between different generations in the workplace can help SMEs become more digital. Aging workers mentioning starters, but also starters with fresh digital skills, reverse mentoring the older generation of workers. Finally, SME networks and partnerships with larger companies can be used to make upskilling and reskilling more feasible and effective, and to integrate it into quality workplaces. And to go further into job quality and digitalization, I give the floor back to Frans in Dublin. Frans.
Yes. In the final part of this presentation, if we go to the next slide, we will discuss a little bit the topic of digitalization and job quality. And this is based on the European Working Conditions Survey of 2024, carried out by Eurofound last year. And what you can see here is that based on the items we asked about digitalization in general, we were able to identify 3 different groups of digital small and medium-sized workplaces. Workplaces because, so we are not asking about the company size, but only about the workplace size. So this has to be kept in mind when looking into this data here. 1/3 of employees work in small and medium workplaces with digital tools and collaboration. So this is the first type. And here you have a high use of collaborative tools, of remote meetings, and also automatic task allocation. The second type is the work automation and monitoring type, which is around 21% of the workforce employing. And this is more a type of, let's say, algorithmic management with automated allocation of working time, automated performance monitoring, and also very high use of computer. And the final group, and also the largest one with almost half of small and medium workplaces, are the low digital intensity workplaces, where you have a low degree of digital adaptation, digitalization in general, and they're also less likely to use advanced digital technologies. We see here also the distribution across the sectors, on this only very briefly. You see that in the financial services and in the education and also in the public administration, the proportion of digital tool and collaboration workplaces is the highest. On the other hand, the low digitalization intensity prevails in agriculture, in construction, and also in commerce and hospitality. And then interestingly, the work automation and monitoring type is very prevalent in the transport sector, where you have a lot of automation and automated performance monitoring, with 41% in this sector. Let's now move to the next slide, where we see some job quality items across these different groups of workplaces. And this regards the job quality dimension of working time arrangements and flexibility. And this is an important topic because, of course, also for the small and medium enterprises to be attractive, they have to offer flexible arrangements, they have to offer flexibility, and in general, in order to compete, they have to offer overall a good job quality. What you see here is that in the blue type, the digital and collaboration type, we see they have the smallest proportion of workforce having fixed starting and finishing times, whereas the other types have almost 2/3 of employees reporting this. Also, working time arrangements are set by the company for most employees in the automated and monitoring type and in the low digital intensity type. Poor work-life balance is not so much an issue, but it is more an issue in the automated and monitoring type, with 20% of employees reporting a poor work-life balance compared to a little bit less than 16% in the digitalization cooperation type. And we go now to the next slide, and I will close with this slide, where we also looked into the impact digital technologies have in general. So we asked here, next slide please, if digital technology removed some of your tasks, the blue bars, created new tasks, the green bar, or allowed more interaction with colleagues, the red bar. What is interesting here is that across all types, with different proportions of course, but across all types, most of the employees said that technology allowed them for more interaction with colleagues. And this goes to 62% in the D&C type, and in the LDI type, it's still 1/4 of the employees there. Then, interestingly, people find that technology has more often created new tasks for them than removed tasks. I think this is a very interesting finding because it indicates that the skills development and training with new digital technologies is extremely important, because what we want is that digital technologies make procedures and processes more efficient and smoother, so to say. So it would be favorable, of course, to have a higher blue bar and a lower green bar, but this indicates exactly in that direction that the skills development is very much needed, and this should be, as we already mentioned, a proactive task for the small and medium, especially for the small and medium enterprises. Thank you.
Yes, my turn. Thanks, Franz, very much for this second part of the presentation. I'm looking, we had some questions between some of the participants, which is actually quite great that you're already, sharing your work and results, which is great. If there is a question about this research, I mean, all our findings that we've presented in this presentation are available on either Sedefop or Eurofound websites. So we can also put those in the chat for people that are interested. The report that we presented today has been published a couple of weeks ago. So we'll put that in the chat as well. And I see that we have a question in the chat now, which is about, actually a second one, great. So this is good. So which areas of small enterprises need digital transformation the most? In SMEs Go Digital, we worked on horizontal digital skills that apply across all parts of an enterprise. How could we go a step further to address the specific needs of each area? I think one thing, one aspect is that we often see in practice that digitalization in SMEs, when you compare to bigger firms, that is quite limited to particular areas of doing business. So accounting or other more technical aspects of invoicing or things like that. So I think probably these more strategic, the more core business side oriented part of it is more underdeveloped. I think maybe Frans, you would complement.
Yes, I would agree. I think I go to the second question, which asks if digitalization allowed for more communication. Do you know if they also need more communication because of digitalization? I mean, whatever you introduce in terms of new technologies needs to be introduced smoothly into a company or into a workplace. And that is the biggest challenge, so to say, because you also have to take into account the diversity of the workforce. And very often it's not a one-fit-all approach that kind of makes these digital technologies as useful as they can be. And therefore, the communication is, of course, a key aspect. But I think this specific question here, if it created more interaction with your colleagues, this refers basically to the fact which we all see also, which we all saw during the pandemic, that is much easier to reach out to different colleagues regardless of where they are, when they work, etc. So in that regard, of course, all the video conference systems and messaging systems and so on have helped also to make it easier to reach out to different colleagues, and that is reflected here.
Yeah, I can complement the question about communication and digitalization. What we see from our research is another type of research, which is where we look at online job ads, which are like put on the market by European employers every day. So we collect all those job ads throughout Europe, and we see what kind of skills employers are asking for. So from that, we see that working in teams is one of the most important kind of skills that employers are looking for. So it's not technical, it's not digital, but it's working in teams, and then also increasingly it's learning how to learn. So it's about renewing your skills, which is becoming very important. So I think those are important, especially the communicative aspects of people being able to work effectively together in team settings is very important. I see that there's another question on micro enterprises, which are 97%. Are there any plans to include them in the DESI metrics, such as the digital intensity index? I think it's probably more a question for the Commission, right, Frans?
Yeah, I think this is for the Commission, but I also know that in some of the aspects, the micro companies are included, but they are not always published in the aggregate data on the Eurostat webpage. But I know also that it is difficult to get the micro data from Eurostat, so that would of course be very interesting to include those as well.
Yes, I mean, in some of our surveys, we try to cover micro businesses, although you do not always manage to the extent that you would probably like to, but it is an issue, I think, a general data issue that, given the amount of micro businesses that we have, that there's not enough data that helps us understand really what is actually the problem and what are the challenges in those kind of businesses. So I think that's a general issue. Another question I see in the chat here, and I think maybe it's possibly the last question that we can talk about, because I'm also looking at the clock, which is always ticking in this kind of event. So can you say anything about AI skills? We can. I will share later with you in the chat maybe some links to an AI survey that Sedafop has done. One of the key findings is that actually the majority of workers are somehow affected by AI, but only 1 in 7 of workers actually, get trained for AI. So there's a big gap, I think, between AI exposure and the training that people receive for AI. We have differences also by countries. We have differences also in the type of AI people are confronted with, because it's sometimes not so easy. I mean, even, people sometimes don't realize they're actually working with AI because it doesn't really look like AI. So actually the measurement of AI itself is already quite a big challenge. I would leave it at that, and I think the questions can continue in the chat. While we also have the panel, so that once the panel is over, we maybe have a couple of questions left that we could also discuss with the panelists. So with that, thanks very much again, Frans. And I would like to welcome to the virtual table 4 panelists actually that we have today. For the third part of this virtual event, which is the panel conversation. So we have 2 rounds and we'll try to cover a lot of ground in those rounds. And as I said, please, your questions, put them in the chat as we talk and we'll try to get back to them. So we have with us today, first of all, Valentina Guerra, who is Policy Advisor at SME United. Hello, Valentina, and welcome. There you are. Great, thanks. And then we have with us Ant Silt, who's lecturer consultant at PCS Digital Skills Academy in Estonia, and Thomas Oberholzer, who's director of KMU Forschung in Austria. Ant and Thomas took part as experts in the research, so welcome very much to both of you. Finally, we have Dr. Mairead Nic Jolan-Michiel, who's coordinator of the DigiAdvance project, which is an EU project supporting SME digitalization. Thanks for joining, Mairead. It's great that you're with us. So in this first round, I would like to start with you, Valentina. So in the report on SME digitalization we've just presented, we point towards the growing number of EU regulations that are reshaping the digital environment for SMEs. So think about the Digital Market Act, the Digital Services Act, the Cyber Resilience Act and the Digital Services Act, but also the broader frameworks like GDPR and the AI Act, which set important standards for protecting fundamental digital rights. So, Valentina, from your perspective, were these regulations designed with this think small first principle in mind? Do you think these regulations strike the right balance between ensuring a genuine level playing field and keeping the regulatory compliance and administrative burdens manageable for SMEs?
Good afternoon, Jasper. Thanks a lot for the invitation and for organizing this very interesting presentation of the report. And please allow me also to thank all the people that participated in this study, Frans and all your teams that with which we've been in contact since the beginning of this project that, as you mentioned at the beginning, is a joint endeavor of SETEVOP and Eurofound, and definitely an important one for SME United and its members, because definitely it helps to put some data and to shed the lights on some of the issues that SMEs are facing when it comes to digitalization. To reply to your question, and trying to be a bit provocative, I would say that we wouldn't be discussing a digital omnibus if we had developed this legislation with the think small first principle in mind. And you mentioned the GDPR, which is really a good example. It created a heavy burden on the SMEs who had to spend huge resources hiring the external support to understand how they should comply with the rules. And it does not seem really logic nor proportionate to entrepreneurs to have to comply with this regulation when, for example, the data processing is not their core business activity. So there is a lot of information sharing, restrictive deadlines to notify the data breaches, even when the risk is minimal. SME United published this year some proposals to support SME compliance. And no one is really questioning the goals, but the main complaints from our members come from the lack of clear guidance, templates, streamlined notification deadlines, and systems. So those are really the elements to keep in mind. And regarding the AI Act, the Digital Omnibus now postpones the application of certain provisions until the Commission publishes guidelines and templates. And we want to believe, and that's what we believe, because as entrepreneurs, we have to be optimistic, that the Commission understood that the Think Small First principle also means providing the SMEs with all the necessary elements before asking them to comply with any provisions in these regulations. And I would also very briefly react on a point that you made during your presentation when you mentioned the fact that there is no proactive role of SMEs in the digitalization. And here I would like to highlight the role of the business organizations. When the COVID-19 crisis started, there were many SMEs, micro companies, that they would have never thought about digitalizing, for example, e-commerce platforms, etc. And the support that our members provided to them one by one, really, to digitalize so that their economic activity could continue during this period was great. And now we know that there are some of our members who have set these services for them, and they go really knocking door by door to the entrepreneurs, trying to preach for digitalizing their companies. And as you mentioned, this is not easy because it has cost, and it also requires the understanding of why to digitalize, what to digitalize, for what processes, etc. So I will stop here to give the time for the discussion. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Valentina. And yeah, very nice that you kind of, to give a complete image of the context. I mean, on the one hand, the heavy burden. On the other hand, also what you say about the pandemic, where actually this is also one of our findings, is that in many small companies, the pandemic was really a game changer for digitalization, and kind of set things in motion that would otherwise have taken years to achieve, and that happened in just a couple of months. So that's very much, I think, also what we find. I would like to move to Thomas for the second question. And so the organization you work for, Forschung Austria, has long studied SME digitalization, innovation, and competitiveness. Thomas, when you look at the findings of this new Eurofound set of report, which of the insights do you think resonate most strongly with what your own research has shown about how Austrian SMEs and European SMEs more broadly are managing the digital transformation?
Yeah, Jesper. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me on the panel, and also thanks for this excellent report. I think it's very good overview on what is happening in terms of SME digitalization in Europe. So congratulations on the report. The findings of the report, of course, widely correspond with our own research in the area of SME digitalization, but also SME innovation more broadly, because we often view digitalization from the innovation perspective. So I maybe just highlight and reflect on two issues which are most which I find most important. So in the report, in the conclusions of the report, you said that there's a need for a shift in mindset among business leaders embracing digitalization as a strategic enabler of innovation and competitiveness. So, and this coincides very much with our view, because I said we are looking at digitalization very much from the innovation point of view. I think so I would support that very much. The mindset shift should not only refer to the business leaders, but also, of course, to the policy approaches, to the support schemes we have in place. For example, so one point, one aspect of our research shows that many very small businesses behave rather passively. I think you mentioned that also in your presentation. They are more reactive. They behave very passively in terms of digitalization. They digitalize because they're pushed to digitalize from clients or other organizations. Often they digitalize because it's the usual trend, so they just follow the trend. So that, of course, also means that there's a certain lack of business cases or of clear benefits that are a major barrier for a more proactive approach, or a barrier to not to act, actually. And it also means that even where we have rather high maturity grades, for example, rates, for example, so that also means that often they fulfill the minimum criteria of digitalization, but it does not necessarily mean very much in terms of competitiveness, competitive advantages, or innovation, actually. So that's an important point to bear in mind. The second aspect here is that our research also shows that today a very large portion of business innovation activities, especially in the area of services and products, involves a certain digitalization component. So according to our surveys, even in small companies, more than 75% of all innovations have digitalization in it, or have digitalization embedded in the innovation. So that doesn't necessarily mean that digitalization is the most important aspect. Often it's just one part of the innovation. Many innovations are not really purely digital. Many are a combination of, say, a new material or something, and digitalization. So digitalization is often more a facilitator, or it facilitates innovation. But nevertheless, digitalization is key to any, or to most of the product innovations of SMEs in Europe. So that means that that we might need to shift a little bit more from viewing SME digitalization as a deficit, or as overcoming just barriers, more in the direction of an opportunity-driven perspective on SME digitalization, more looking at the opportunities, at the competitive advantages they could gain in this context. And today, and I think even more maybe for AI, digitalization is often seen from an efficiency or cost-saving point of view. I mean, that is very important, of course, the larger the company gets. So for larger companies, we see that the motives are more often cost savings or efficiency. For smaller companies, the motives are more often, apart from the more passive aspects I mentioned before, are more often getting into new markets, innovating, getting a new product on the market. So from that perspective, it's very important to I think, as you said, shift our mindset in terms of digitalization support, in terms of digitalization policies, towards a more opportunity-driven approach, and maybe overcoming a little bit the deficit, overcoming deficit approach. So that's one important aspect and one important conclusion from in your report, I think. A second one is, you mentioned in your report the importance of collaboration and knowledge transfer. And I think that is also key for helping SMEs digitalizing. Of course, I'm fully aware and I fully agree that digital upskilling of staff, of managers, and of entrepreneurs is very important, especially in terms of specialist knowledge. But SMEs won't, even in the long run, won't be able to develop the same in-house competences and the same in-house knowledge and skill base as larger firms do. So this aspect of collaboration and knowledge transfer, and providing structures and networks that are very easy to access for SMEs, and that also are on a kind of equal footing with SMEs, so speak the same language. We often have difficulties maybe at the university level in this respect, But this aspect of allowing them access to knowledge which is outside their firms is also a very important policy approach for the future, I think. Yeah, so that were 2 points which I think were very interesting also in your report.
Great. I take away the need for shifting from a deficit approach to an opportunity approach, where I think also is linked to seeing digitalization not only as a tool but also as a mindset and as a strategic way of doing things in different ways. So I think that's great. Now you mentioned workforce training, which is of course very important, and the next question for Hans is actually about that. So the expert we've consulted in our research frequently emphasized that workforce upskilling is essential for raising digital intensity in SMEs. Now, from your experience with Estonia, which training tools have proven most effective for SMEs that we know struggle with limited time and resources? Hans, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for the report and for the question. To address these needs, we have tried to define 3 clear SME segments or groups. The first, we cannot neglect also the digital business SMEs, either in ICT sectors or in other sectors, which also struggle with upskilling and have shortage of funding. Of course, their upskilling needs are high-end and very specific, like cybersecurity and software development for drones or things like that, which are not available in the Estonian market and may be very hard to find also on the international market. So there we have not figured out what would be the way forward. They can apply for general funding from our labor agency, for some resources, but these are still limited for so specific trainings. So they are left alone. Learn yourself or find in the world something suitable. The second group is the digital aware companies that clearly struggle with limited resources, defining their skills need and also funding. And their skills need maybe quite on a high level also. The thing here is that we understand that we can't address all of these, and they are quite specific, and they are generally not available on the market, such trainings. So we have centrally, through our qualifications agency and ICT Skills Council, have centrally tried to define the priority roles, job profiles, role profiles, and develop for these centrally in cooperation with the industry, with training providers, tools that would help the training providers to develop the learning and programs. So like all related to data analytics, data management, data governance, machine learning, develop role profiles, competence profiles, educational profiles. And these are distributed, and on the basis of that, the training providers can develop their boot camp, reskilling trainings, or even formal educational bachelor programs. And also, as the priorities are chosen, it's for the government decision makers also easier to allocate funds, either for development of such learning programs or for participation. And this stands for cybersecurity, for different topics. Software development still going on. And the third group, of course, is the difficult one. The old school companies, which are many in Estonia, established 30 years ago after our independence and still with the same ownership and management, who are not on the digitalization road. Three models. brainwashing courses. Sorry to say that crash courses starting from 2 days up to 6 months, master classes for management teams, really to get what the digital transformation is, that it's not rocket science, to develop their strategic plans. But it's so hard to reach these people. They don't come. So the second possibility is through the employees. We still provide basic digital literacy courses, and the company management are usually quite interested in providing that. So this is a tool. And the third thing is, what we're trying now is digitalization agents, internal trainers to find savvy technical people in these companies and give them the skills how to go to the management, how to do this transition. This we are doing with quite success, but not much as we would wish, of course. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Hans. And I think fascinating also in the sense of how you described the completely different realities in different types of SMEs and how those require different responses. In the last case, where the most difficult to reach, you have to quite go out of your way to actually achieve impact. Where we know that also in the Estonian way of doing, it's there's a lot of ambition in that. So I think that is also from our experience going quite well there. We've come to the last question in the first round, and this is from Mairead, this next question. So it is if you could briefly introduce the DigiAdvance project that you're working with, explaining why it's important for SMEs going digital. So this EU-funded project, how does it work? In a few minutes, of course. And what results have been achieved? Mairead, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Jasper. Delighted to be here on behalf of the DigiAdvance project. And actually, it's a lovely segue from what Ant said. So we found that one size does not fit all, definitely does not fit all. And just to give a really quick introduction to the DigiAdvance project, obviously funded under the Digital Euro programme, we have 6 partners based in Ireland, Spain and Portugal. We have employee agencies, we have employee groups, we have industry partners, and we work together. For the initial part of our work was around a skills mapping of SMEs, and we have that on our website, digiadvance.eu. And that was very, very interesting to us because it showed that breadth of experiences, barriers, what they need, what they don't need, and it could range from the divide of those highly technical companies to those that are quite, I would say, on the cusp of technology as opposed to being quite nascent in their engagement with technology. So very similar to what Ant was saying around a lot of the issues. So it's not just in the Baltic segment, and I think the report showed that. So look into the west of Europe and also to the south of Europe as well. We have some of the same issues. We developed over 40 courses in a range of different modalities. And we were looking at employees of those organizations. So, as Ant was saying, they're trying to get in at every level that we could. We also arranged events such as accelerator events, networking events, and did those type of in-depth sessions with managers to provide them with opportunities to really understand what a digital innovation was and what the potential for that. We also took a focus on bringing sort of use cases to SMEs, so to try and show them that here's specific, or here's an SME that's in your particular sector, and here's a use that they're getting out of it. So for instance, whether that's talking about what, creating a digital or an AI assistant, creating a financial assistant, how could that look? How could it work? What would it mean for you? And how could that have an impact on your process? So we've had a huge amount of participants in our program, which has been fantastic. We've had a lot of feedback around what we can and can't do better. And obviously, it's the same things that we keep seeing. People are time poor, they have a lot on, and that balance has been huge to try and get that into place and trying to deliver training and education in all different ways. And what we also find is that SMEs, I know we've sort of said that sometimes they don't always think to the strategic, but when strategic is tied to survival, I think they really do focus in and zero in on that. And they're very, very clear about what they need and what they don't need in those instances. So we would have participants in courses who would say, well, we co-constructed courses with obviously our partners, and they would say, we only want to do one topic area on this because this is exactly what I need to know. And I think that's really, really interesting. So for us and our perspective is that when we would have SMEs come back to us and say, have you achieved what you wanted to achieve with the training? And obviously, and from a education and training perspective, we're all about completions. Did you finish the whole course? And they would say, no, but I got what I needed because I did that. And now I understand what to do, etc. I think from our perspective as well, we went across a whole divide of technology, basic technology and digital literacy, then to more very much in-depth skills for the higher end of the market, whether that was, you know, up at machine learning and things like that. For us, I think it was pulling back the blinkers for a lot of people of how this could be done in simplistic ways as well. It doesn't have to be all the bells and whistles for many SMEs particularly. So showing them how to use analytics in decision making, showing them things like that. And obviously we spoke a lot about, and you mentioned there about some of the transversal skills needed as well to support digital, supporting some of those transversal skills within SMEs. We hopefully around collaboration and things like that. That was one of the other areas that I thought was interesting from the presentation earlier on. So a huge amount of work we've done, and I think from the perspective of where people or where SMEs want to go, I think it's from, they will tell you very clearly what their requirements are. And again, the spectrum of SMEs is huge. And we dealt with quite a number of micro SMEs, and you spoke about them being lost sometimes in the numbers. I think from their perspective, they're very much around the survival piece, and sometimes they are around the most innovative users of digital because they're doing it because they need to get ahead.
Great, thanks very much for that comprehensive overview. I think very obvious that apart from courses, you create a whole infrastructure, including manager training, use cases, role models, which is basically a full support approach. I would like to now come back to Hans for the next question. Again, a question on Estonia, which is more about lessons that we can learn from Estonia. So Estonia is frequently viewed as a digitally advanced country, quite digital advanced in Europe, yet the report indicates, not only our report, but many reports that indicate that high-performing countries also face digital skill shortages. Do you think there are lessons that we can learn from Estonia's national digital skills ecosystem that we could transfer to other EU countries? Hans.
Thank you. I think there are. The first, somehow we have succeeded to distribute the understanding skills first. So whatever you do, you start with the skills, defining the skills. And the one lesson and the one tool or system I would really like to bring out is the national skills forecast and skills development governance system. It's called OSKA. It's under the qualifications authority. And this tool introduced like 10 years ago has really changed the learning market, also for the universities and the vet school and all vet training providers, making it much more transparent, understandable, and quicker to move. So quite a robust methodology on the background, how to understand the labor market, which are the job profiles, what are needed, where it is going, where are the competence needs going, and what's the training provision. And comparing that, not just analytical survey, but bringing together the industry experts, all the significant training partners, and the government decision makers. Now, what will we do with that? What should be changed in the curricula? Where are the reskilling needs, etc.? And if we define the core, like previously I said, the core competence or educational profiles, and define how much of these people is needed, it's easy to pick up also for the universities, the schools, the training providers. And it's easier also to get funding and focus on that. So this tool, the methodology, is in detail described on the web. Also, I would really think that for all the countries, such tool, because quite much of that is introduced in many countries. Maybe Estonia's smallness has helped that being a really successful tool. Thank you.
Thanks, great. And also, we are, as Sedefop, we're very much aware with your country system, because we actually support us and have supported Estonia in, getting even better with the system. So
thank you.
I think also,
yes,
it's also a very good example for us to bring to the table for other countries to see how this can work in practice. And now, of course, OSCA is a skills intelligence system, skills governance system, which comes more, let's say, at the start, because you want to design your training in particular ways. Now, also an important part of policy making is evaluation, which comes at the end. So I think we can safely say that Eurofund and Sedefop, the two agencies here today, fully recognize the importance of sound evaluation of policy measures. It's actually very crucial. So the next question is for Thomas. Our report actually calls for coherent digitalization policies with measurable targets. So taking the example of Austria, what is your view on how countries can better integrate research evidence into the design and evaluation of SME digitalization programs?
Yeah, well, we've done a couple of evaluations of support programs in the area of SME digitalization, SME innovation. So repeatedly there are coming up a few issues, and one of them is the definition of the target group. And I think Merit and Ants, they both have already referred to that, and referring to the heterogeneity of the SME sector and of the different needs they have and the different characteristics and circumstances they are in. So this is, and also in addition, of course, digitalization itself is a very multifaceted, very diverse aspect. So we have seen it's about starting from social media and then up to machine learning and AI and so on. So both SMEs and digitalization are both very diverse phenomena, actually. And support programs, as we see it, often struggle with addressing and reaching out to the right group of SMEs and getting the balance right in this respect. Often they are working with size industry or some kind of maturity levels. Often it turns out then when one evaluates the program that the target groups are still not ideally defined and need to be changed. And here I think that research can help a lot to understand different groups of SMEs, looking at the whole landscape of SMEs, analyzing what their characteristics are, what their motives are, what technologies are they are going for. So researchers, you did it, so are very important to give an overview to policymakers to define target groups and to reach out to the right SMEs, actually. And a similar similar aspect is also research can help to define a useful and effective combination of or sequence even of support, because we've seen that there are a lot of forms of support needed, starting from financial support, upskilling. It's also important to bring these forms of support into a sequence, because usually, they do not, maybe they do not necessarily start with skills needs in the first place, but in maybe developing a strategy, for example. Financing maybe comes at a bit later stage, something. So it's also important to understand the sequence and the combination. What kind of support forms could be integrated into one program, or where do you have intersections or an interplay with other support programs? And I think that research can also be very useful in giving some kind of guidance for policymakers to understand what kind of supports should I combine into one program for what kind of target groups. Including also the networks and the knowledge transfer that I mentioned before, and are also very important, of course. For example, in our research, we often suggest or recommend also integrating or mainstreaming digitalization advice, for example, in traditionally non-digital support structures. So in order to have, to reach out to companies that use other support structures, but have first access to digital issues, digital topics they want to address. So that's also a possibility of shaping the whole landscape of support programs. Overall, I think it's very important that there's a constant evaluation of policies, also a constant evaluation of more strategic programs, because digitalization itself is developing at a very fast pace. And digitalizing in terms of AI may be something different than digitalizing like 10 years ago in the field of social media or websites. So it's all these reports, all the research are only for a certain period of time, and you need to look at them again, to look at issues again, and to evaluate programs on a regular basis, and to adapt them also on a regular basis.
Thanks. Great insights. I take away there's many different ways this research evidence can support actually the setting up of the programs. But I mean, apart from support, financial and whatever else, network support, one part of support is also providing more flexible qualification options and skill development pathways. And those are actually quite in the spotlight in current policy debates. So I'd like to ask the question to Mairead. You're the Director of Micro-Credential Strategy and Innovation and Head of DCU Studio, which is an innovation and digital transformation unit in Dublin City University. And I'm looking for some answers in the sense of if you could reflect on Ireland's national experience with micro-credentials or micro-qualifications and their relevance to SMEs. And maybe these lessons learned could help other countries also develop micro-credentials.
Yeah, I think Ireland's really set the sort of pace with respect to micro-credentials. And I think there's been a few sort of facilitating factors for that. I think because we're very much an open market and open skill. So we need to have skilling and upskilling that. And we're trying to bake that into our DNA more and more and more. And I think we've had quite an influx into Ireland as well. So we therefore see there's more importance for having a variety of forms of education. I think key to that has been the coherency to the education that we're trying to provide in Ireland, so that anything that we do, that it is formed around those sort of really good values that we have in the European higher education, but things that we've really set down. So building on what we have. So we're not trying to recreate new things in lots of ways, but we're trying to make sure that anything that we do is holistic. My institution, Dublin City University, and we've been part in a number of different projects. So one of those is the Microcreds project, which is a national project for micro-credentials in Ireland, and we've done a huge amount of work building on what Tomas was saying there around sort of a holistic ecosystem and working with employers to try and understand what those skills needs are, working with the SMEs in particular, because we have a huge amount of SMEs in Ireland. We have a lot of the big industry and big corporations, but we have a huge amount of SMEs. And I think that's been a constant engagement. And we've also defined, say, from my own institution's perspective, we've defined ways of working with a variety of different industry and societal partners to provide them with the flexibility of engagement to really get at what they need and what they want, and then try to deliver out on the same. And that's been really, really important. So if you look to what Microcred has done, you know, we have our national platform, we've done all of those type of things so that access awareness is quite easily. The government provided in Ireland a learner subsidy there for a lot of those micro-credentials. And hopefully that subsidization will go through a mainstreaming now and become a core part of what we have available for those employers and the employees of SMEs and other organisations, so that they can benefit from that skilling. And I think that conversation is still ongoing in Ireland. I think there is a huge thing that we can learn from the individual learning accounts. I think that's something that Ireland hasn't engaged with yet, but I think that's something that we can do. The other aspect that I wanted to draw attention to was, you know, about this recognition of competencies and skills that individual employees have. Through our work that we do with the ECIU University, which is one of the university alliances, we have done a whole digitalisation of micro-credentials. So when we issue a micro-credential, it is a verifiable digital credential. And we also, in that credential, tell, using the ESCO framework, what skills have been provided. And I think from a recognition perspective of skills, etc., that's really, really important. And we've developed that somewhat. So I think in Ireland, and we're going through our second phase currently of the Microcreds project, and that will be finishing up in March, but hopefully there will be more. We're trying to embed that within our ecosystem. So talking about digitalization of what we can for employees of SMEs, but also for all industry, and also to support recognition of skills, competencies and knowledge that people are achieving. I think that's been a hugely important part of not only Ireland's story, but of what Europe is trying to do in this respect to support mobility of employees, and also to support that upskilling and reskilling agenda.
Great, and I recognize, you know, the quite fascinating achievement. I mean, we also take at Selfo, we work a lot on green transition as well. We know that Ireland is also in that area quite a forerunner and a very inspiring example for other countries. So thanks a lot for explaining all that. The final question brings me back to Valentina. So we've seen from the research that the smaller the business, the wider the training gap often is compared to larger, better resource firms. So that brings up the question of how effective EU digital skills funding programs have been so far in reaching SMEs. And if you would look ahead, what action should the EU and national governments prioritize to ensure that digital upskilling becomes accessible, practicable, and feasible for all SMEs?
Thanks, Jasper. Let me start by commenting on the role that the facility has played for SMEs, because we have not really discussed about the status of infrastructure in the EU in the aftermath of the COVID-19 crisis, where in many member states the needs of digitalizing was clear and high, even for public services and the private services. However, there were no infrastructures, and even less in the local and rural areas. So the role played by the Recovery and Resilience Facility there was extremely important. We still have these plans. We also had a number of other EU funds that helped at local level to develop for the infrastructure. Aside from that, the EU has put forward a number of academies as well. There are the Cybersecurity Skills Academy, And then in the framework of the Digital Europe work program, which will run until 2027, there are 3 digital skills academy on quantum technology, AI, and the virtual worlds. And these will be launched. They're just being launched. I think the call for project ended in April 2025. So now the Commission must be assessing. So let's see how this project will deliver. We saw that with the other academies, there was quite a fair good take-up of upskilling and reskilling modules. And of course, as many of the other panelists already mentioned, for SMEs, what works is modular, clear, easy to access training that allows for taking the training and continuing the economic activity. So, of course, Europe is investing a lot in digitalization, following also the adoption of the Draghi report and now the competitiveness fund, etc. However, I could not, as representing a social partner here at European level, not mention the fact that the digital skills go beyond SMEs. I mean, we have an issue in our society when it comes to digital skills. We still don't have a performative education system that teach the basic digital skills. Now the Union of Skills also comes a bit as an initiative with some part, like, for example, AI in the Education Initiative, the roadmap on the future of digital education, and also somehow the intergenerational fairness strategy will come a bit with some sort of solutions. But nevertheless, what the EU can do is definitely continue to develop these programs by giving clear guidance that it's implementable by SMEs, and then continue investing on the training on the entrepreneurs. Mayor had mentioned about this, how it is important to guide them specifically. And then on the other side, there's also the need for increasing the incentives for SMEs to provide this training at the workplace. I mentioned at the beginning also the need to consider the rural areas and then the local communities who are a bit further from the big cities where all this innovation and digitalization happens. And I would like to conclude on the need to make sure that these trainings also reach the rural areas. But here it's really much linked still to the development of infrastructure. So we hope that in the next multi-annual framework budget for the EU, there will be adequate funding, be it through the ESF, Erasmus Plus, and then the competitiveness fund, that it's available and usable by the SMEs. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Valentina, also for this outlook. I think which we touch many important areas. And I see we have some questions in the chat. I feel that some of the aspects of this question have been answered, maybe not all of it, but I also see that we have little time left. So whatever questions are left, we'll pass those on to the panelists so that they can be answered later. I would like to give the floor now to Sarah Riso from Eurofound in Dublin, who will do a quick wrap up of this session, and then we'll jointly conclude this virtual get-together. Sarah, are you there? There you are.
Thank you, Jasper, and good afternoon, everyone. A lot has already been said about how to help SMEs progress on their digital transformation journey, but I want to return to the insights that we gathered from the many experts we spoke to in this research, because the report we have just published is not just grounded in data, but also in many conversations that we held with over 80 national experts, and these are people from employee organizations, ministries, research institutes, training providers, and also some trade union representatives. And these are individuals who work with SMEs on an ongoing basis and know very well the constraints SMEs face with regard to digitalization. So they were an important source of information for us for this research. And before going any further, I want to extend a sincere thank you to all of them, also on behalf of my colleague, for participating in this research. I also want to remind you that you can find links to the individual country reports that informed the main summary report on our websites, on the Eurofound website, the same page where you can find also the main report. And I want to go back to some of the points. I'll try to distill some of the key messages. And going back to this idea of reactive digitalization. And during the pandemic, we have seen many SMEs adopted digital tools, we already said, out of necessity, but often in a fragmented, short-term way, really a quick fix here, a small upgrade there. So again, as already been said, what was missing was a strategic, a long-term vision for digital transformation. And this is still the case now. And so to change this, SMEs needed more tailored support, starting with the leaders and managers. So not just training in technical skills, but guidance really on how to develop strategies, how to fit these technologies, these digital tools into business strategies, workforce planning, product, service development, marketing. So the biggest barrier isn't the technology itself, but as Thomas reminded us, is leadership and mindset. The experts also pointed to what worked best in practice. They referred a lot about simple, accessible support mechanisms, things like voucher schemes, easy access to credit and programs with minimal bureaucracy. Yet these agile measures often suffer from limited budgets. And to really reach SMEs, policymakers need to partner more with organizations, with the organizations SMEs already turn to for information that they trust. So top-down government messaging and strategies alone won't really drive widespread digital adoption. So information must really flow through existing networks, which is why involving these trusted organizations and networks early in policy design is so essential, and also help implementing the think small first principle in policy making that Valentina mentioned earlier. Another major issue is the lack of policy evaluation. In many countries, the priority is to spend the funds quickly rather than assess whether those funds actually make a difference. New initiatives are often launched before previous ones have been properly evaluated. So we lose valuable lessons there about what worked, what didn't, and how to improve things. And this is not just a minor detail, it's fundamental. We are often asked in Eurofound which policy work for work best, which policy measures. But the truth is that very few policy measures are rigorously evaluated, and when evaluations do happen, quality varies widely. So if we want better evidence and better outcomes for SMEs, then systematic high-quality evaluation must become a priority. So just to sum up, the message from the experts we consulted is clear, constructive. SMEs can absolutely make real progress in digitalization, but they need a support that is simple, visible, targeted, monitored and properly evaluated. So they need initiatives designed around their actual reality, their actual needs, not just around funding cycles. And they need a system that learns from experience rather than constantly starting from scratch. So I close here. Thank you once again to all the experts who shared their insights with us. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for the wrap up. I think this also gives some homework for us as agencies to work on better data, better evaluations, etc., so that we contribute to making things for SMEs, measures for SMEs better. So that concludes this virtual get-together. I would like to end by thanking everyone who made this event possible. And that includes our directors, Jürgen Siebel and Divino Calvin, our panelists, Valentina, Hans, Thomas, and Marit, my Eurofound colleagues, Frans Eijven, Sarah Risso, James Higgins, and Elena Biaggi, and at set of my colleagues, Cristina Zografia de la and colleague Grigori, and Christina Rana from our communications department. And of course, you, our participants. Thank you for being with us. We'll get back to your questions as soon as possible. Centerforum Eurofound will keep promoting evidence-based EU conversations on labor markets, working conditions, jobs, vocational education and training and skills, and many other issues. And we will also keep teaming up in the years to come. We hope to see you again at one of our future events. That's it for now. From Thessaloniki and from Dublin, we wish you a nice rest of the day. Goodbye.